Hey everyone, welcome to the channel. My name is Nader. In this video, we're going to wrap up the second part of this JavaScript series with another project. I'm super excited about this project. I've been actually itching to show and share this with you. We are going to build a Pokemon downloader application. All right. Now I'm going to go through in this video a whole bunch of things like prerequisites, the requirements for this, a little bit of a demo and some advice for you, just like we did with the Blackjack application. And then I'm going to kind of set you loose, and over the next couple of videos, since this project is definitely a little bit larger than the Blackjack one and a little bit more involved, I'm going to need a couple of videos to kind of go through actually building it out so I can actually explain it in enough depth that I want to go through. So let's just get right into the project. So to start, the prerequisites. I think this is super important. So for this project, we need to know these things beforehand. If you do not know these things, definitely try to figure out where you can learn these, or you can check out the rest of the videos on the channel. I have topics videos on every single one of these topics, and you can learn them, and that will be enough to actually go through this project. But you definitely want to have practice with these as well, as opposed to just kind of learning them conceptually. So you really want to make sure you're comfortable with these topics before moving to a larger project like this. So what are these prerequisites? Well, here are the basic ones that we went through in the first part of the series. Things like variables, conditionals, loops, functions, arrays, and objects. In the second part, we went through some more kind of complex intermediate topics, such as vanilla promises. Then we looked at async await and how that made the syntax a little bit easier to work with promises. ES modules, so we can import and export different modules, both in our own code and NPM. We looked at NPM itself and how we can actually install modules off the internet from npm.js. And then we looked at the Fetch API recently as well, which actually for the first time allowed us to reach over the internet to grab some resources. So if you don't have these, don't fret, right? Definitely check out the channel, and you can actually get up to speed on a lot of these if you need it. But make sure that you really are comfortable with these topics before moving on. So this Pokemon downloader, I just want to kind of set the scene for what this app is going to be doing and what we're actually going to be testing ourselves with skill-wise. So I showed this in the Fetch API video. I switched it up a little bit. I made it a bit more cute for us. What we're going to be doing is we're going to be making requests to a Pokemon API. Now this API, we haven't really learned much about APIs yet, but effectively it's a computer or a server that exists on the internet somewhere that has been built by a bunch of really wonderful developers just like ourselves. And they respond to requests for information about specific Pokemon. They have a whole wealth of information about Pokemon, things like their stats and their types and their attack and their defense, and their pictures, and all this kind of fun stuff is all stored on these servers. So what we're going to do is we're going to build an app that allows us to make a request to this server. So this is us over here. We're going to make a request over the internet to this server over here. We don't know where it is. We just know the URL or the address, the web address for the server. We're going to say, hey, for example, do you have information about Pikachu, right? Everyone's favorite Pokemon. And the server is going to kind of check its data banks, and it's going to be like, oh, yes, I totally do have Pikachu's information. And it's going to respond to us with JSON data. So this is a JSON API. It's going to respond with key value pairs that we can actually parse with JSON on the front, I say front end, but inside our application, where we can actually pull out values like the name or the weight or the stats of the Pokemon. And we can do things with that. So we're going to get that response as JSON, for example, for Pikachu, and then we can actually work with it inside of our application. Now, in future videos, we're going to see how this can be done from a website, for example, like from HTML. But for this video, we're going to be focusing on building a command line application strictly in Node.js. So let's take a look at the requirements for this. Now, I know there's a lot on the screen. This is quite a big application, so bear with me as we go through this together. I also have a GitHub repo where you can kind of pull this information down using Git if you like, or just browse through it on the actual repo itself if you don't want to kind of pause the video and kind of just note these down yourself. Whatever works for you, the resources are there for you in the description if you need it. Now, The point of this application is to build what's called a command line interface for downloading Pokemon information. Okay, and command line is effectively the terminal, right? Wherever we type node and then a file like main.js, for example, that's the terminal, right? So our entire app is going to live in that terminal. It's not going to be the most beautiful thing in the world because we're going to be kind of telling it commands to do, but what it's going to actually do for us is going to be quite remarkable and quite amazing. Okay, we're going to be using this API right here, which I'll show you in a second. It's the Pokemon API. This is the web address, pokeapi.co. In fact, let me just pull it up really quick. So if I go to Google and I search for Poke API, this is the website right here, pokeapi.co. And if I pull that up, let me just kind of zoom in a little bit here. This is the Pokemon API, RESTful Pokemon API, and we can kind of play around with it over here. And you can see what the response looks like down here. This is some JSON data. So this is exclusively what we're going to be using for this project. Okay. So this Pokemon API is going to give us a whole bunch of information about the Pokemon, right? There's things like the weight and stats and abilities and moves and all that kind of fun stuff. There's also information about pictures. So if I go back here, if I kind of scroll down here, I'll just show you some examples. I'll just go through this a bit more detail later. But for example, here, if I zoom in a little bit more even, we have this kind of a sprites area, right? And if I open up one of these keys, which is a URL in a new tab, what we'll see is a very, 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 very small ditto from behind. So if I change this to, let's say, one of my favorite Pokemon, Mew, and I try to look at the front, for example, instead of the back, because that's a little bit strange. There we go, that's Mew, right? And there's many of these sprites and other much higher quality images there as well that we can download. So our application is going to allow our user of our application to basically do a few things. One is choose the name of a Pokemon to download. I guess technically I forgot that here, but I should probably add it, but hopefully that's pretty self-explanatory. We need to allow the user to search for a Pokemon. And then once they've chosen a Pokemon name, so for example, if I choose Mew, right? Then what I'm going to do is I'm going to ask the user what information they want for Mew in that case. Okay, I'm going to show you a demo in a second. Okay, they're allowed to choose one of three options, or sorry, not one of three options, a combination of these three options. So they can choose one, they can choose two, they can choose all three, or they can choose combinations of them. Okay, so the first option is just plain old statistics. Okay, I'm going to show you what this looks like shortly, but effectively this is just a text file that's going to have things like their attack, their defense, special attack, HP, all that kind of information as a text file that we're going to get downloaded to our computer. Okay. Then the second thing we're allowed to download or for them if they ask us to is the sprites. And that's what I just showed you there. So there's really up to 8 of these that we can download. Some Pokemon have less, some Pokemon have 8. And these are those two-dimensional kind of photos that look like this. Okay, so those are the sprites. And when we choose this, we just download all of them, all the possible ones, whether it's 4 or 8 or something in between or even less. Okay. And then the final option, and they can combine and mix and match these options, is the artwork. And that's the official artwork for this Pokemon. So let's take a look at where that is, right? That's inside the sprite section, inside the other section. They really nest us in here, inside the official -artwork section, and then front_default. So if I open up this for Mew, oh my goodness, zoomed in. There we go. That's Mew, gigantic. Right? So this is the official artwork for Mew according to this Pokemon API. And if we search other Pokemon, we'll get their version of their images. All right. So you can see that that's a bit more higher quality and higher res in the sprites. So we can kind of allow the user to download a mix and match of this different type of information. All right. So what's going to happen is after we prompt the user for the Pokemon that they want, right? And then 1, 2, or 3 of these bits of information, stats, sprites, and artwork. Then what we're going to do is we're going to create a folder with the Pokemon's name, and we're going to grab that information from the API and put it into that folder. So what that's going to look like is, imagine we had Mew, and I'll show you a demo in a second, but imagine we had Mew. We would create a Mew folder, and inside of the Mew folder, we would add a stats.txt only if I chose stats as my requested thing to be downloaded. And then I would save all their main stats in there, and I'll show you what this looks like. If they chose sprites, right, then what we would do is we would download those kind of 4 to 8-ish sprites, right? So for example, we had these sprites over here, back default, back shiny, front default, front shiny. Some Pokemon have some more, like back female and back shiny female and things like that. But these are the 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, and we want to download those 4 to 8 for sprites specifically, if that's chosen as an option. And then those should be named accordingly, right? So if we're downloading sprites, we would name them back default, back female, back shiny, etc. Okay, so the keys that come back is the name. Okay. Then what we want to do is if they choose artwork, we want to download that Pokemon's original artwork, which is nested in this structure here in other, and then in official-artwork front default. So we would get back basically this image saved to our disk. If we chose sprites, we would get back like 8 of these, but in different orientations. All right. At the end of all this, the user should be asked if they want to search for another Pokemon. Okay, so they're going to keep being prompted to ask for a Pokemon. Like, which Pokemon do you want to search for? I want to search for Pikachu. Okay, for Pikachu, do you want stats, sprites, or artwork, or kind of like 2 or 3 of all of these, right? Then we choose those, we do all the downloading, then we get prompted again. Do you want to choose another Pokemon? No, I don't. Okay, then I quit, right? So to accomplish this, we're going to use a lot of modules and libraries that we can download from NPM. So I've listed those over here. Now, I highly encourage you to use these. If you don't want to use these, you can use whatever you like, but the kind of preference would be to use these, since that's also what I'm going to be going through in the videos following this to actually build out this application. And you only need these 4 things to actually build out this app. Technically, you can get away with a little bit less, but it makes our jobs a lot easier if we have these 4 things. The first 2 are from NPM. Right? You don't need to install fetch again if you're on node 18 or higher, but if you're on lower, install fetch from node fetch, inquirer from inquirer, and that's going to be our command line program. And I'm going to show you what that looks like in a second. That's going to allow us to do this kind of stuff right here, where we can kind of choose just sprites or artwork and sprites or stats and sprites or all of them, right? Or none of them. And once we choose that, then we're going to use fetch to actually go and get that information. Okay, fs, we're going to import from this fs/promises package, and that's actually built into Node. We don't actually need to npm install this. This is the promiseified version of the file system package that allows us to use things like await. Okay. We want to then use path from path, and this is just going to make it easier for us to kind of deal with file paths when we're actually choosing to create folders and files and things like that. Okay. Now, the next thing I want to show is what this actually looks like, because a picture really is worth 1,000 words, and a demo is worth 10,000 words in this case when I actually show you what it looks like in practice. So this is some screenshots of kind of me running the application, right? So I coded this up. And I came up with something that looks like this, right? Feel free to change it up a little bit, but generally you want it to look kind of like this. So let's take a look at this right here. Okay, I have this Pokemon downloader. It's kind of showing its intro, and then I'm being prompted here for a Pokemon name to search. All right, so I'm going to type the name of the Pokemon I want to search, in this case, Pikachu. Okay, and what's going to happen is once we do that, we're going to make a fetch request, right? So once we enter Pikachu, we're going to make this request over the internet out to pokeapi.co. It's going to search for Pikachu. It's going to give us back the JSON for Pikachu. We're going to get that back as a response. And then we have that in our app now in Node.js to actually do stuff with. Okay. Oops. Okay. So once we ask for Pikachu, for example, then we're prompted for those 3 different options, right? Stats, sprites, and artwork. Now I'll show you what this actually looks like, but what happens is we actually get a little like kind of radio button or checkbox selection kind of thing where we can kind of go up and down with our keyboard, and we can choose and select and deselect or select all and unselect all. And it looks kind of nice. And this is all coming from the Inquirer package. Okay, all this is coming from Inquirer. Then what we're going to do is, depending on what we chose, we are going to kind of log out what happened. So in this case, you can see I'm saving all of these files. I think I forgot this to log out stats here, but stats was saved. And I'll show you what that looks like as well. But most importantly, these images are also saved. You can see official artwork and then all of the names of those images for all the sprites. Then, as I mentioned, we're asked if we want to search for another Pokemon. Right? In this case, I say yes, I do. And I'm going to be prompted again for Pokemon name, right? So maybe I want to search for Mew this time. And for Mew, maybe I only want the stats and artwork. So you can see I forgot the stats here to be logged, but they were saved, and I only get the artwork saved here. In this case, I can search one more time, for example. If I say yes, Blastoise, maybe only the sprites, and I get back all the sprites, and I won't get the stats, and I won't get the artwork. Okay, so that's kind of how it works. This on the right here is 2 examples of what those folders will look like after I ran this kind of program in this way, right? So you can see for Pikachu, I kind of got all of Pikachu stuff, right? Pikachu has all of these different sprites. It has official artwork and the stats. Okay, for Blastoise, I didn't ask for the stats and I didn't ask for the official artwork. I only asked for the sprites, and Blastoise only had 4 sprites, so it only downloaded these 4. Right, and similar thing for Mew, I asked for the official artwork and the stats, and I only got those downloaded. Right, so notice that they're all in their own folder by name. All right, cool. So the stats file is going to look like this. Okay, each Pokemon has their own stats. So if I pull up the API again real quick, and I kind of scroll up here, I believe it's under the stats key. So let me kind of minimize some of these. I'll minimize sprites and minimize types here. And you can see that there's a stats key right here. If I open that up, you can see that in here I have things like HP, right? So in this case, Mew's HP is 100, a value of 100. Mew has an attack of 100, right? Mew has a defense of 100, right? Everything is 100 for Mew. All right, so that's what we're listing out inside of this stats file, using a format that looks like this. Okay, so we need to actually figure out how to kind of format this string, I should say, and save it to our disk as stats.txt. Okie dokes. So let me actually demo this to you in actual code, or in the terminal, I should say, and kind of show you what it actually looks like, because this Inquirer package definitely has quite a lot of functionality. So really quick, before I do that, I want to show you, this is Inquirer, right? So this is coming from NPM, and this is what we're using to actually do those prompts, right? So you can see that there's a whole bunch of stuff here on how to actually use it. There's a whole bunch of different methods we can use. It's pretty powerful. You can see 22 million weekly downloads, pretty awesome package. Same thing with Node Fetch. We've used this so far quite a lot. This is going to fill in the Fetch API if we don't have it available in Node 18 or higher. Also probably one of the most popular packages. Okay, so we're going to use at least these 2, and the other 2 that we need, path and FS promises, are going to be built in. All right, so I'm going to pull up VS Code. I'm going to actually go through a little bit of the function signatures, which is just what the functions look like, without showing you the code later, if you're interested. Okay, I don't want to show you the answer if you're not interested in that. I'm just going to show you a demo of how this application works. So you can see that I have not very much code in this file. This is my entire application. All the code is actually hidden inside of these other 2 files. And we're probably going to need to go through each of these in a separate video because it's quite a bit of code. Okay, so I'm going to run my Pokemon downloader file using node pokemondownloader.js. And when I run that, I'm going to get this prompt, right? So notice if you look on here on the left-hand side, in my folder structure, I don't have any folders apart from my node modules, which is where all of my code is for my fetch library, for example, and the Inquirer library. Okay, so if I search for, let's say, for example, just to show you that this is working live, I'll do Charmander. Okay, and when I type Charmander, I'm then prompted to choose the information that I want. And all of this is coming from that Inquirer package. Okay, so in this case, I'm using one of the types in there to kind of show this list of stuff. So I can, according to Inquire, I can say press space to select options, A to toggle all, I to invert the selection, and enter to proceed. So for example, if I choose A, you can see that all of these get highlighted. If I choose A again, they get deselected. I can move up and down using my arrow keys, right? And I can use the space bar to select different options or deselect them. Right? So pretty powerful. This would be super annoying to build by yourself and not very useful to even reinvent the wheel here. So definitely take advantage of this package to actually get this functionality because it works quite nicely. All right, so I'm just going to choose everything here just to show you kind of what that looks like, the stats, the sprites, and the artwork. Then I'm going to press the enter key, and you can see that it's going and fetching in this case, a bunch of information for Charmander. Again, I forgot to show that I'm saving the stats.txt, but it is there, and I'll show you that in the folder in a second. So you can see that we saved back default, back shiny, front default, front shiny, and official artwork, right? Because I asked for stats, sprites, and the artwork. I'm then being prompted to search for another Pokemon. Before I do that though, I want to open up this Charmander folder that just popped up. You can see inside of this folder, I have all of those images as well as the stats.txt. If I open up back default, you can see I get Charmander's back, back shiny, front default, front shiny, and official artwork. Oh my gosh, right? So I think I just want to appreciate how amazing this is. I think when you actually build this, and I'm going to mention this a couple of times, when you see this pop up on your screen, you're probably going to jump for joy. Like it's truly magical. Like it's just amazing when you finally have this working. Even something as simple as this text file, which is arguably definitely less visual, is really amazing to actually see it get the live statistics for that Pokemon. So that said, in this case, we can see Charmander's HP, attack, defense, special attack, special defense, and speed with their requisite values. Okay, so now I can search for another Pokemon if I want. I can say yes, for example, and I'll just kind of go through this loop to do this whole process again. So for example, if I search for Squirtle and I press enter, maybe for Squirtle, I only want, for example, the artwork and let's say the stats. I don't want the sprites. Okay, I'll press enter. And now I'll have a Squirtle folder pop up, right? And inside of Squirtle, you'll see I have only official artwork, right? Look at that, so cute. And then Squirtle's stats right here, which are different, right, than Charmander stats. Okay, so then I can say, no, I don't want to continue. And then the program terminates. Okay, so hopefully that was a good demo because there's quite a lot going on. Okay, this Inquire package allows us to do a whole bunch of stuff. We can kind of loop through this and go through our entire process again for different Pokemon. We have these 3 different options. We can choose any Pokemon that exists. And quite frankly, it's just quite a lot, right? All these folders are being created with the Pokemon names. So it's quite overwhelming when you think about this. Now, if you're sitting there and being like, oh my gosh, Nader, like, what the heck is this? Like, why would you torture us with this crazy hard project? I don't blame you at all. Honestly, I really don't. There was a part of me that made me, like, I wanted to make this a bit simpler. I really did. But then I realized that it's super, super important to get practice with something that's really, really kind of hefty. Right? You want to have a program that you're proud of and that excites you and you can't wait to jump on and build again, even if it frustrates the heck out of you as you're building it. Okay, this definitely hits those notes for me. I really hope it hits those notes for you. I've helped others build similar kinds of programs, and that excitement that you get when you see these things being downloaded after hours and hours of kind of failure, there's really nothing that beats that feeling. All right. So I hope you can trust me that this is going to be painful and you're going to struggle a lot, but it's totally, totally worth it. Even if you're not able to get all the way done and maybe you only get to a bit of this being downloaded or even just logged out, it's a huge accomplishment and you'll feel really great and build your confidence. Okay. So hopefully that gives you an understanding of how this works. Practically. Okay, so what I want to do is I want to just give you some advice. I did this in the Blackjack project, so it's pretty much similar advice. I just want to kind of bring it up again, just in case you haven't seen that, because it's so important. Then we're going to go through some tips specifically for the project, but I'll mention that beforehand so I don't give anything away for those of you that want to build this without any kind of heads up as to how to actually approach it. So now for the general advice. So as I mentioned, this project is intentionally difficult. All right. Now, when I was going through school, I remember kind of going through courses and the teachers would be like, okay, like here's this problem, you can work on this problem. And then you kind of do it and you'd be like, yes, I feel good. I'm doing these little problems and it's working. And then it comes time to like an exam or like a project, and the project is like literally 100 times harder than anything that you did during the class, right? Has anyone had that feeling? I definitely have had that feeling, and it's super frustrating. I understand that, and I really appreciate it. I tried really hard to tune this project to make sure that you get a feeling of being stuck and then unstuck and then stuck and then unstuck, because that simulates what it's like in the real world. It's literally not possible to sit there and code this in one go with no mistakes. Even me, who I live and breathe this stuff every day, it took me probably like an hour or two to build this out, right? And of course, there was some tweaking and difficulty changes I wanted to make and all that kind of stuff, but it still took me a while. And in that while, I made a bunch of errors. It wasn't perfect. I wrote a bunch of code and I ran it and I got some errors, right? And I had to fix it. And I was like, oh, of course it's this thing, right? So it's not going to take you an hour or two. If it does, please let me know, because I probably didn't make this difficult enough, but I'm quite confident that it's not going to take you an hour or two. It's going to take much longer, probably an order of magnitude more than that or more. Okay. I did this on purpose because in order to really learn, you need to get stuck, and you need to, as counterintuitive as it sounds, be frustrated and then overcome that frustration. Okay. When you're programming in real life on a team with other developers, there are going to be many times where you get stuck. And the first kind of inclination is to reach out for help, right? What you want to do is build that muscle memory so you get stuck. You're going to do some Googling, you're going to look online, check Stack Overflow, try a couple things, have it break, check the errors, get a different error, do all that kind of stuff. Maybe 15, 30 minutes, and then maybe you can ask for help or look at the answer or whatever it happens to be, right? If you skip directly to asking for help or giving up or like looking at answers, for example, you're actually doing yourself a huge disservice, because what's going to happen is when it actually comes to building that problem yourself in the real world, you're not going to have that available to you all the time, and you're just going to get frustrated. Okay. The best developers are the ones who are just kind of comfortable being uncomfortable. Okay. And you will really tune that skill over time. So it's not only about the programming, it's just about the mindset as well. So definitely keep that in mind. When you get frustrated while you're building this, sit back and just be like, this is part of the process, right? Like woo-saw a little bit and as best you can. And for some people, it's easier than others. And realize that that's part of the learning process. And everyone goes through that. Absolutely everyone, myself included. Okay, so I kind of went through a few things here. So, right, if you get stuck for too long, take a break, go do something else, go for a walk, get some coffee, have a tea, talk to someone, and then come back, and you'd be surprised how having a fresh mind really helps. Google is your friend, right? Don't try to just memorize everything. Don't try to just kind of do it without searching the internet. The entire point of having a computer and having the internet is that we have this vast array of information available at our fingertips. Use it, right? Definitely use it to your advantage, because that's exactly what you're going to do in real life. No programmers in the real world sit there and build this stuff without referring to documentation or Stack Overflow or asking other developers. Also, that said, when you are referring to things like Stack Overflow, for example, I've mentioned this before, but it's just so important. Honestly, like if you even forget a lot of the other stuff, I think this is one of the most important things. Do not ever copy and paste code off the internet. I'm going to repeat that because it's so important. don't copy and paste code off the internet. Even if you know what that code is doing or you've written that code 1,000 times before, just manually write it out yourself. I know it's just like, why would I do that, Nader? That's a total waste of time. There's just a bunch of console logs or whatever it happens to be, right? But that muscle memory is just so important. If you start copying and pasting, you get in the habit of that, you will lose a lot of that muscle memory and you're going to need to look up stuff much more and you'll actually not be as effective as a developer, guaranteed. All right. Next, you want to be able to break down these problems into smaller sub-problems and solve them independently. This is especially important now that we've learned ES modules. You can actually break up your functions and split them by use case into different files now and actually import them into other files. Because now we're getting to a point where we're going to have so much code that putting it all in one file is going to get a little bit unwieldy. You still can do that. I think I ended up with maybe around 200 lines of code or something, and that's with some comments and some other things in there. And I was trying to be a bit more efficient with my code, so it might be more, it might be less, but that's quite a large file, right? I think I'll say later I ended up using maybe like 11 functions, for example, right? That's definitely quite a lot of functions. So break it up into functions and split those functions up to separate files if it's easier for you. And probably, I keep saying this about most important, but this really is the most important thing. Just have fun, okay? The purpose of this project is, of course, to learn. It's also to get frustrated, get stuck and unstuck, but really it's to have fun, right? We're working with Pokemon, right? Like, look at this. We're working with Pikachu. Pikachu loves you, right? Don't get frustrated. Just have fun. If you're getting frustrated and you hate this, it's not going to be a good experience, right? The mindset makes a huge difference. If you're having fun, making incremental progress, it's going to do wonders for you in your journey as a developer. So make sure that you're enjoying this project and actually being excited about actually seeing this information come back, and you will have a much, much better time. Okay, so now it's a time where I'll tell you that I'm actually going to go to some project-specific tips. So if you don't want to see those tips, then you can kind of stop the video and work on this yourself and maybe watch this after you've taken a look or if you get stuck. Okay, so for the tips, the most important thing is to make sure you understand the requirements, right? Maybe rewatch the part where I kind of went through the demo, make sure you familiarize yourself with the process, ask yourself, what is happening when I press enter here or I type this in? What's happening when I select these things and then I press enter? What's happening when it asks me, do I want to continue with searching the Pokemon, right? What are the actual steps that might need to take place behind the scenes to make that actually work? So this is kind of a high level overview of the process. This is going to help a lot, but I'm not going to be giving away too much. I'm going to be giving away incrementally more as we go through this video towards the end, if you feel you want that help. It's totally fine to look at this, and this is just going to help you organize your thoughts and organize kind of how you approach this project because it's very, very large. So the first thing we want to do is we want to fetch the Pokemon object for that string that the user is specifying. So when I asked for Charmander, we need to make a request to this Pokemon API for Charmander, right? Charmander, just like this. We need to make a request to this URL asking for Charmander's information. All right. And once we have that object, right, this entire gigantic object with all of Charmander's information, abilities, experience, yada, 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 species, sprites, stats, etc., right? Once we have this huge object, what we can do is use information in that object to do future requests if we need to. Okay, so for example, if the user asks for sprites, we know that those URLs to fetch are inside the values for these keys inside sprites. Okay. The next thing is create just all the functions, just as many functions as you can, lots of them. I told you I had 11 functions, and I'll show you what those functions look like if you're interested. And you can do it with more functions, you can do it with less functions, but just be aware that if you try to do this without functions, you're gonna have a bad time, okay? Because it's really hard to think about this just in steps of execution unless you abstract these concepts and name them as nice functions that do little bits of reusable functionality. Okay. So the imports, again, I think I mentioned them earlier, are these ones right here. So these first two are from npm.js, I should say. So you actually have to download those. And then fs is the promised version, which has the async await syntax. And then path is being imported from the path module, which helps us with files. And that's also included inside Node. So these last two, we don't actually have to npm install. So I would probably split this into two sections. That's what I'm going to be doing with the videos as well. The first part is making sure you can fetch the data and get to the data that you actually need. Technically, there's three parts. The third part is actually making sure you install everything and you know how to use this inquirer package to actually ask for this information and then maybe log it out, right? So I would first get that inquirer package set up, make sure you go through their documentation online, look at their examples, and then actually start working with grabbing that string like Charmander and then making a fetch request and logging out that JSON that comes back, right? Because when we grab this JSON, if you can log this out, you're on the right track, right? That should be kind of your first goal. Grab that string from the user and then actually log it out. Then the second thing you can do, and this is probably the more challenging portion, I mean, the first part is also quite challenging in the setup, but this has its own challenges, is using the FS module, right, from FS promises to actually do the file saving for the things like the images and the stats, okay? That's a whole nother adventure. That can be done independently of just fetching the data and making sure the inquirer command line interface and everything works out correctly. All right, so don't try to do this all at once. Split it up into logical sections that are independent so that you can actually test them as you go and make incremental progress. One other thing you might find useful is to separate all of these files and functions into separate files. So I'm going to show you, I separated them into technically 3 files. 2 are the kind of big ones that have a lot of the functions in them. And then 1 kind of imports just them. It's kind of like my main file that actually just runs the main code. You don't have to do this, but it definitely helps with organization. Use the async await syntax to simplify promises. You don't have to do this again. It just makes it much easier than doing kind of the promise chains of .then and then figuring out what to do with those promise chains. Last but not least here, when you're downloading things like a bunch of sprites at once, these are all different URLs, right? So you can see right here, we have a whole bunch of URLs, like 4 in this case. What we can do is make a request out to them one at a time. And that's totally fine. In fact, I probably would encourage you to do that first, right? Make requests, fetch requests to each of these one at a time. If you want to optimize that process though, as I mentioned here, you can technically fire off all of those requests at once and use something like promise all to actually wait for them all to come back so that your code runs much faster. You're not just doing them one at a time. And I'll show you that when we actually get to the code. Okay. So again, I'm going to give you a chance to pause here if you feel comfortable kind of with this and have a feeling of where to start, because what I'm going to show you next is the function definitions, but not the code, just the function definitions of how I personally split up this project. All right, so here's my VS Code. As I mentioned, I had this Pokemon downloader file right here. Okay, so I'll just zoom in a little bit more even here just so we can take a look. So I have something I'm importing from another file, so the ES modules, a console log, and then calling one function, right? You're probably looking at this and be like, what the heck is this, Nader? Like, why are you doing this, right? I just want to show you how far you can go with modularizing and splitting out your code. So these 2 files here, prompts.js and saving.js, are where the bulk of the code actually lives. So let me show those to you now. So prompts.js. Inside of here, I am importing a bunch of stuff. I'm importing something else from my saving file. And then I have this 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 functions. Fetch Pokemon. This is a async function that takes a Pokemon name and it goes and fetches it and gives us back the JSON. Okay, I can reuse this in different parts of the app if I need to. Prompt for Pokemon. This uses the inquire package to do that first step, which is right here, of prompting for the Pokemon name. Okay. It has no arguments. Same thing for prompt for download info, this one right here. This is doing this part right here where you saw me be able to go up and down and select kind of 1, 2, or 3 of those different options for stats, sprites, and artwork. I hope I said prompt for download info for that. I got confused as to where it was. Prompt for Pokemon is where I asked for this Pokemon name. Prompt for download info is where I'm asking for these 3 informations as kind of that checkbox style radio thing. Prompt to continue, I just made another function here, which is going to be this one. Would you like to search for another Pokemon? Yes or no? Okay. And I kind of wrapped all these things up into one bigger function that makes use of all these called prompt user, which is what I'm actually using in this file right here. Okay. And I'm exporting just the prompt user because that's all that has all the logic inside of it. And it is using these functions inside of it as well. So I'm not going to show you the code for this. I just want to show you the structure so you can kind of think of how you might do this. This is just one way to do it though. Okay, this is not the only way to do it. This is just one way to do it. Now, this is for all of kind of the prompts and then a bit of the fetching logic. All of the file saving stuff is over here. So you can see I have fetch here for something, and I have my fs and my path module in here as well. So for this file, I have the ability to create a folder. And this takes a folder name and it goes and creates it. So that's what's creating this Squirtle folder and the Charmander folder. Okay. I have a save image file. This takes a file path and an array buffer. Okay. And we saw array buffer when we actually saved images in the Fetch API video for the practice problem sets. So this is just going to take a path and then the kind of image, and it's just going to save it to that path. Okay. So that's what's actually doing this kind of stuff where we're saving things like the official artwork. Save Pokemon stats. This is going to take a folder name and a Pokemon stats object. So the Pokemon stats object looks kind of like this. Where is it? This one right here, this stats object right here. It's going to take this object and it's going to take the folder name and it's going to save the stats txt based on what's inside of that stats object. Same thing for save Pokemon sprites, but this one needs to make a fetch request out to all those 4 to 8 different sprites and then save those to their actual correct names as PNG files inside of the same folder name. Same thing for save Pokemon artwork. It takes a Pokemon or folder name, and then a Pokemon sprites object, right? Which is this one right here, this gigantic sprites object right here. It's going to take that. And it's going to grab the official artwork out of it using a fetch request and actually pull that down and save it to the disk. Finally, I have parse options, which is similar to the other file where I kind of combine a whole bunch of these different things together into one bigger function, which I can use inside of my other file. Now, this is just one way of doing it. You don't have to do it this way. I just want to show you how far you can go with splitting up these functions and also using something like ES modules to split it up into separate files as well. So these are kind of logically together inside saving related stuff for the most part. And then prompts are kind of in the one spot for the most part. Fetch is kind of the odd one out. And then in this file, what I can do is just kind of import what I need and just call it so that I can actually make the code work. Okay, so that is what allows us to get something like this. Now, you can build this however you like. Okay, this is just one method and my method and the way that I'm going to be showing you as a potential solution to this project. There is in fact an infinite number of solutions to this project, so I can't obviously show you all of them, but I can give you some tips, as I just mentioned, on how you can kind of approach it. And if you start mentally modeling these things as different functions or different modules and functionality, it definitely makes your job easier. And if you can try each of those first and test it out and make sure it actually works independently, you're going to build that confidence and be able to eventually progress to building and chunking those together to make bigger functionalities. Okay, so that's pretty much how this project is going to work out. In the next 2 videos, what we're going to do is kind of build this out together using the code that I have. And we're going to start by looking at kind of the first half where we're going to probably look at something like prompts. And then the second half, we're going to look at all the saving and file system stuff. So I hope that you enjoyed this video. If you found this project interesting, I would love it if you could like the video and subscribe to the channel. I'd love to hear in the comments how your process is for actually approaching this project, whether you think this is too hard or you're getting stuck or frustrated. Definitely share it in the channel and we can help each other out in there as much as possible. Don't give up though, honestly. You would be surprised if you just keep going at it and looking online for things and asking for help. Eventually you'll solve it. And then seeing these things come back, seeing something like this come back and saved to your computer is just a truly, truly magical moment. So I can't wait to get to the next videos where we actually go through this and build it out together. I will see you there after you try this project out yourself. See you later.